Hi, welcome to this week's Authors Love Readers podcast, where we delve into the stories behind the stories. We're asking authors questions, some of them fun, some of them serious, and from their answers, you're going to learn things you never knew about the people who write the stories you love. My name is Patricia McLinn. I'm your host and designated question asker.
I'm Lisa Hughey, and I'm an author who loves readers.
Now, let's start the show. Hi, and welcome to the Authors Love Readers podcast for the week. This is Lisa Hughey visiting us today. I haven't known Lisa as long as a lot of the other authors I've talked to so far, but we met at a Novelist Inc. conference. You know, that might be an ongoing thread about how I know these people. We hit it off and had really interesting conversations. So I'm looking forward to continuing that, especially because I get to ask the questions. And first question is going to be to have Lisa tell us a little bit about what you write.
Hi, Pat. Thanks for having me. My name is Lisa Hughey, and I write almost everything. I write romantic suspense, romantic thrillers, paranormal romance, and I'm branching it out into contemporary romance a little bit more now.
Did you get a lot of advice to not do that, to focus more on one genre?
You know, I think especially when you're starting out, I think that's solid advice, and I adhered to that. So I started with romantic suspense, and I want to say 7 or 8 books in that genre. Then I had this paranormal that I had written that I really liked, so I continued on with that series. And the reason I started Contempt was I did a shared world with some friends. And so even though that wasn't my genre, I really wanted to do this with a group of friends. So I did that and then wrote a follow-on novella to that same world. And then, last year was kind of a rough year and I wanted to write something happy. So even though maybe it's not the best career move, I didn't care. Honestly, I wanted to write something happy. Lighter, happier.
And did that help?
Yes. Well, so I actually have been working on the series world and haven't written that much in the world. I did a book in another shared world called Camp Firefly Falls, and in that book, I introduced this new contemporary series. And so I've been playing around with all the characters in the series, but haven't written much of the books. There's going to be 5 books, and I'm working on book 1 right now. But yes, it was great. It's been a lot of fun. Even though my suspense isn't like super dark, I do a lot of research that gets into darker things, and I may brush over it in terms of like the plot, but if you start reading a lot of dark stuff, it can impact you, and the world's been kind of dark in the last year, so I wanted to go the opposite. And I think it was good for me personally.
I got a lot of advice from people, especially earlier in my career, to do the same thing, to stay within a narrow bracket of what I was doing. And I didn't want to. I kept being told I was pushing the envelope. And I said, what envelope and where? And where is the edge? So I empathize with that a lot. And my question then is, what response have you gotten from the readers? How do they feel about it? Do you find you have different readership for different things that you're writing, or are people following you from one to the other?
Definitely different readership, which I found out. I released in 2016, I released 2 in paranormal suspense. So not paranormal romantic suspense. It's like remote viewing, but still in my suspense genre. And my readers did not follow. They were not interested in those books at all, which was news to me. That was a little bit of a fail, but it's fine. I tend to write like light paranormal. Like I don't create like this whole crazy, there's no vampires or werewolves. It's more like a paranormal overlay of existing suspense plots. And my readers did not follow me there. But I just did a survey. My last newsletter, I sent out a survey asking people to rank like what of mine they do read. And I think my suspense people have carried over into my regular contemporary romance. So,
Ah, that's
which is good
interesting.
since the suspense is where more of my core readers are anyway. And I probably should keep writing the paranormal, but I like it. I like it's I find it fascinating. So I'm going to keep doing it, even if only like 100 people read them.
Well, there should in quotes for business reasons, but then there's should for keeping you fresh and interested in the writing. And I think when you're doing a project that's fun for you, I think that carries over to everything that you're writing and sort of effervesces all the other works that you're working on.
That's a good word. Yeah, I would agree. I think that as much as, like I said, my suspense readers didn't necessarily carry over. I loved writing those books. I find it's a fascinating subject. Remote viewing is like the idea that you basically like leave your body in one place and your mind travels somewhere else. And it's actually based on the CIA program that existed in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically recreated it in the 2000s, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to read. Like I read books by people who have supposedly done this remote viewing, and they're not like the guy who wrote the one book I read. It's not a woo woo guy. He was a military. I think he was a Marine, and then he worked for the CIA. Like not somebody that you would think of who would even believe that that was possible. So it's fascinating.
Well, it sounds to me like what writers do all the time. You know, our bodies stay in one place and our minds go all over the
That is
place.
so true.
Okay, let's ask you some quick questions to let readers get to know you
Okay.
better. I'll give you an easy one first. What's your favorite color and why?
My favorite color is green. I think it has to do with the fact that most of nature is green. I like being outside. I like plants, even though I kill them. I find green very soothing.
Oh, that's great. Do you have a favorite taste?
Salt.
Uh, I'm surprised at how many of the authors are going to the salt. I thought a lot more of us would be toward the sweet, but okay. Do you have any strong fears, and have you used that then in books?
I am terrified of open heights. So I'm not great in the mountains.
Oh,
And no, I can't write about that. I get vertigo. I don't know. No, I can't write about it even.
can you access some of that fear to use for other fears in your books, or is it so visceral that you just steer clear?
Actually, yes. So that I can do. So I'll think about how I feel
Mm.
when I'm on the edge of a mountain, like a lookout or something. I'll take that because I literally have like that flight reaction.
Okay, have you had any surprising jobs in your life?
Surprising jobs. So my very first job, I think I was 12 or 13, and it was like the precursor to telemarketing, but that's what I was doing. I was sitting up in this attic in this old house with a telephone and a phone book, with paper and a pen. And I was cold calling people from the phone book to see if they would come into this dress shop. This woman sold like designer clothes made specifically for people, so they were custom. And she was trying to get people into her shop for appointments, and that's what I did. It was awful. It
Bet
was
it was.
awful. And it was before
Wow.
telemarketers. Like it was literally like before telemarketers were a thing. So, people were surprised that you were calling, and it was a crazy way. I can't even believe she had us do that. Like looking back on it.
And if you sound like your age, I would imagine that would throw some people off
Yeah, because I
too.
was
And that's such a specific, it's
it
crazy.
was
So telemarketing was not your
not,
future.
no.
Okay, so from still sticking with your childhood though, did you have any books that really opened the idea of stories to you that really made you love them?
I loved to read. I don't remember super early, but Nancy Drew, Pippi Longstocking, and then,
Mm.
as I started reading more adult books fairly young. My mom loves romance, so I was reading her Harlequins, like her presents when I was like 13.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. When you were younger, did you used to fret about anything or multiple things that now you say, "Oh, for heaven's sakes, what was I worried about?"
I used to just always be polite, even if somebody was rude to me or kind of like if you got the wrong thing in a restaurant, I'd just smile and eat it because I didn't want to. I didn't want to make waves, and now I won't do that. As a matter of fact, last week I just had my hotel room moved because it was this ridiculously small room, and I thought I was paying for a room, like not a closet. And I would have just said, "Oh, I guess that's all they have," and I said, "No, this is not what I'm paying for."
There's a great book. This isn't quite the same thing, but there's a great book called um, "Women Women Won't Ask." I think that's it. It's the gender divide on negotiating. And it's a really fascinating book. One of the things I always thought that I was moderately assertive. And when I read it, I realized I wasn't, especially always. And the other thing that really kind of hit me was that it said that the younger generation, and the author taught at Wharton Business School, and she was using her students for some of the studies. So these are intelligent, business oriented young women, and they were still making the same mistakes. They were still not negotiating, not asking, and it hurts them throughout their careers, especially in negotiating the very first salary, because then it tends to be subsequent raises are based as a percentage of that initial salary. So you're always in the hole. So I highly recommend that to anybody. I may give it a reread myself, see how I'm doing.
I think we're taught to be polite. We're taught not to make waves. Be polite, be nice to everybody. And that's fine as a general, like treat people with kindness, but it's not okay if you're just getting walked over, like walked on all the time. And I do think that we do our daughters a disservice by, making them too nice.
Well, and I believe that you can be polite while you are also standing up for yourself. You don't have to be
Right.
nasty. Sometimes I want to be nasty if they've pushed me, if they've hit my temper. But most of the time, I find if you are adamant but polite, that things will come around the way they should be. Like with your meal, if you ordered the wrong meal comes. I had you as a kid. Now I'm going to ask you a high school type question, or teens. Did you have a song at that point in your life that you thought, just, this is me. This speaks to me?
So, I thought about that question a lot. I hope it's okay for me to say that you send us questions so we have some idea.
Sure.
And I couldn't necessarily.
And then I spring other ones.
Yeah, exactly. Just to throw us off. I prepared, Pat. um, my thing is, I love music, pretty much all kinds. I think the only type of music that I'm not crazy about is jazz. And I apologize to jazz musicians everywhere. It just doesn't really work for me. And like super angry German Wagner classical. Besides that, I like everything. So I was trying to think if I had a specific song, and I just can't. I couldn't think of anything that really worked. Now in college, I had a group of friends, and Tina Marie's "Lover Girl" was our anthem. We made sure it got played at every party we went to, and we all danced together. It's still, if I hear that song, I think of my friends from college.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I have one from college, is Starry, Starry Night. Actually, it was earlier than college, I think. But there was something about that song that I just felt was speaking right to me.
It's a beautiful song.
It is. It is. And from college, then, we used the old Beatles song, There Are Places I Remember.
Oh, yeah.
Is that the title of it? I'm not sure that's the title, but that's some of the lyrics.
Right.
And we did that in our final party. or parting party. And so that has a lot of meaning to me too. Yeah. Well, those are great songs. Really important question here. Are you left-handed or right-handed?
I'm right-handed.
On your right hand, is your ring finger or your index finger longer?
Okay, so now this is weird. When I looked the other day, they were basically the same length, but now my ring finger is a little longer. So I don't know.
You know what? Sometimes it's the angle, and especially if you put your palm away from you.
Yeah, my ring finger is just slightly longer.
And now here's the other part of the question: is your left hand the same way as your right hand?
Yes.
Okay.
I
don't know what it means. I have no idea.
Super wisdom to be imparted. I'm going to learn something.
I'm just curious. That's all. Somewhere back in the recesses of my memory, it says that in hand reading, left or palm reading, left hand is what you started with, and your right hand is what you've made of yourself. But I have no idea what the significance of the length of your fingers is. Maybe somebody will tell us. So I've just been going around asking that nosy question just for the heck of it. Okay, so I have this bizarre desert island in my head where you can play movies, but you can only play 3 movies forevermore while you're on this desert island for however long you're captured there. So which 3 movies are you going to take to my strange little desert island?
So I'm going to take Little Miss Sunshine, National Treasure, and Indiana Jones, the first one.
Okay, I can see a connection between
second 2. Sure.
Yeah. So what do you see a common thread with all 3 in your mind, is there?
Not with all 3, no.
You just like it. Good. Okay.
I love Little Miss Sunshine. I think it's brilliant.
They're all upbeat isn't quite the right word, but I think of this quote from Jessica Tandy, and I've never been able to find it like online to confirm it, but I heard her in an interview say, and this is a paraphrase, that she wanted to make movies that when people left the theater, they were glad to be a member of the human race.
Oh.
And I thought, yes. Those are the kind of movies I like to watch. Those are the kind of stories I like to read. Those are the stories I want to write. And I can see that as being a thread with those books.
Yeah.
Those movies, rather.
I like
that they appreciate the human race.
I think all 3 of those movies, too, there's like a sense of hope at the end, which is pretty much I write romance, obviously. That's pretty much the definition of romance, right? Hope for the future.
Yeah, I like that. So as long as we're talking about that, do you have a motivational upbeat quote that you like, that you repeat?
Yes. Mine is everybody's path is different. And another one might be comparison is the thief of joy.
Oh, who said that?
Oh, shoot. I believe it was Eleanor Roosevelt, but I could be wrong.
That's a great one.
It might have been Teddy Roosevelt. Isn't it great? I think that whenever I have that like temptation to compare whatever, somebody's kids or my career or whatever, I think about that, and my path is completely different than their path. So of course our results are going to be different at this moment in time.
Yeah. My mom always used to say to me, if I were comparing myself to somebody, they got to be on the pom-pom squad, which I did eventually get on, but not the first year I tried. And she'd say, okay, but do you want her whole life? I go, well, no, I just want this one good piece. Exactly. Come on, give me a break. And she'd say, no, it's a package deal. And it's, oh, darn. I thought that was totally unfair.
Yeah, that's smart.
Yeah. So here's a question from a reader, and I'm going to read it as she wrote it. Where do your stories come from? I know one author who dreams her stories. Another has a character suddenly taking up residence in her head. So how are your beautiful stories born?
I love that question. So I actually use things that are happening in the world quite a bit. A lot of times, especially in my suspense plots, there's always a kernel of truth, something that's happened or something that's speculated that's happened. And it provides that little jumping off point. And then, of course, I ignore whatever happened in real life and, make up my own circumstances. But I'll start with something that actually happened typically in current day, but not always. And then I also think with that thing that happened, what's a good character match for that event or that situation? And then I kind of go from there.
Okay, so that leads into the next question about how you take it from that spark, that initial thought, and develop it into a book. So your next step is looking at the characters
and the what if. So as an example, my first thriller, I have a series called Black Cipher Files, and the first book in that series, Blowback, it has current day espionage characters, but the whole idea of these characters came from a research book I was reading called Body of Secrets. It's a nonfiction about the National Security Agency. It's a fascinating book that runs through the history of how it was formed and various operations or world events that they were involved in. And I read this, it might have been a paragraph or a page about a U.S.-British joint task force during World War II. Captured this castle in Germany, in Nazi Germany. They captured this castle, and it was literally like code breakers. They were just, people sitting at machines breaking code. But here's the cool part. So they captured all those people, and it was a race between the U.S. British allies and Russia, who was actually also our ally at the same time, to get to these German code breakers, because even though we were allies with Russia, it was rather reluctant. And so we got there first. We captured these people, and they disappeared. All the records about what happened to those people are still to this day classified. I was like, well, what happened to those people? Where did they go? So I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about, okay, so if they're gone, they had to have put them somewhere, and if it's classified, then somebody somewhere must know something, like their descendants. There must be something with their descendants, something. So I took just that and started thinking that my current day espionage characters would be the descendants of those code breakers. And so there's actually like a mystery surrounding the code breakers, and then a suspense plot with the current day people.
The mystery of the code breakers, is that carried through the whole series then?
Yes, it's a trilogy, and you find out, in each book, you find out a little bit more about what happened to these people. And again, it's all made up. It's still classified. I have no idea what actually happened to those people. But I found it fascinating that it is fascinating. When I was writing the first one, it was classified, and it came up for, I guess, I think it's Congress that has to declassify the information, and it came up in 2012, and they still voted to keep it classified. So there's something in those records, whatever it is.
Wow, pushing 70 years later. It's going to be fascinating when they are declassified. Have you ever written anything where you thought you were making it up, and then you found out it was there was truth to it, whether it happened, for whatever reason?
I don't think that's ever really happened. I don't know. I mean, it might be kind of funny if it was, but not as far as I know.
I had just a small thing. I had a character, the hero of Prelude to a Wedding. I thought I was making up this occupation, that he was an antique toy appraiser. This was, 30 years ago. And then lo and behold, not only was it there an occupation, there was an association of antique toy appraisers.
Right.
Who knew? Not me. I didn't know that clearly they did. So that's my small example of that happening, where you think, oh, I'm going to just totally make this thing up. Nope, already exists. Which of your books has been the easiest to write? Just a joy.
It's actually not a full length book, but it's a novella. It is called One Silent Night, and that's the one that's in the shared world. I have a group of friends. There's 7 of us, and we created this fictional town called Snow Creek in California. And there's like a little tiny bit of magic in some of the stories, but it's centered around Christmas, and there's 7 different stories. And I wrote this story. I tend to be more plot driven, I think. I mean, I'm character driven, but not super emotional. And I wrote this story. It was a couple that was getting divorced because they'd had major infertility issues. And they spend Christmas together because her mother's dying and she doesn't know that they're getting divorced. It was really emotional and really intense. And I had no idea I could write a story that emotional. And it just like flowed out of me. It was an amazing experience. And I love that story still.
Do you think it affected your writing subsequently?
Yeah, because I didn't up until that point. I'm not very angsty. I tend to write characters who already are fairly solid in their sense of self. They may be unsettled in some way, but they're not struggling just with their own humanity. They've already kind of got that down. So I don't write super emotional stories. They're happy and there's good things, but they're not super emotional. And I realized after writing that I could write something that was more emotional. And I think that my books have gotten better because of writing that story.
It always fascinates me how one story or one book can push us in new directions and help us grow as writers. So your most recent book, what is that?
So my most recent book is called His Semi-Charmed Life. And that is also part of a shared world. That's the Camp Firefly Falls, which is super fun concept. Basically, all the stories are set at Camp Firefly Falls, which is a summer camp for adults. So there are adult things that happen. And it's just a really fun. It's like, going back to summer camp as an adult, which is a lot more fun than, when you're a kid and your parents made you go. So I had a lot of fun writing that story. And the premise of that story is that these 2 people actually met at camp 20 years ago. Penny, the heroine, was 9, and Diego, the hero, was 15. And he was a counselor, and she was sort of a spoiled little kid. And they have this interaction, and it sort of changes both of their perspectives. So she's spoiled and very well off, and he's first generation Puerto Rican with kind of a tough, beginning. It shifts both of their perspectives and forms how they both approach adulthood, and then they end up meeting back at camp 20 years later. And it's a really fun story.
Yeah, it sounds like that would be pretty toward the joy side of the writing continuum. Have you had any books that were really difficult to write?
Well, the third book in the Black Cipher Files trilogy was really hard. I wrote those books over probably 6 years. I would go back and forth. Each book has their own plot, but then there was an overarching story question that had to be answered, and I had to tie everything in, and I had to make sure that the timeline worked and that everything that I had set up in the other 2 books made solid sense, and the timeline of these ancestors. And so that was really hard to make sure I got everything in that was important and still make it interesting. And like the suspense, like you needed to, be rooting for these characters. And every time I was writing something, I was thinking, oh God, but did I remember to put this, X, Y, and Z in? And that book was a lot of work. It was a lot of work.
Uh-huh. Did you find that the readers reacted to it well?
Yeah, actually, I think it's my highest, as far as reviews go, it's my highest rated book of all time.
Terrific. There seems to be a thread that as hard as when a book is hard for us, the readers don't necessarily recognize or get that feeling of how hard it was for the author.
Right.
And often respond really well to it. And sometimes the ones that were like, oh, this was so much fun to write for the author, the readers are like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Well, I had a book that I wrote. I'd been thinking about the character for a while, and I think it's probably from a character arc and a plot arc, one of the most technically perfect books I've written. I really my readers weren't crazy about it. They didn't hate it, but they weren't in love with it either, and I was really surprised because I was like, this book is really like I said, almost technically perfect in terms of my character arcs and my story arcs and everything else. And the readers didn't respond nearly to things that were much harder to write.
That's I think, as I said, a trend, and it would be interesting to know if there's something that comes through in the books that are difficult to write that the readers pick up on subliminally. I don't know. I find that very interesting. Okay, and a reader asks, when you finish a book, do you miss the characters? Do you think about them afterwards?
Yes, absolutely. I do. I'll think, I wonder where they're at. Like what, and I'll think about that. Like, okay, are they going to have babies? Are they not? Are they, moving in together, depending on the story? So yeah, I do definitely.
Has it ever made you go back and write another story about them or connected to them?
So not necessarily about them, although in the very end of so I have a series called The Family Stone. There's 7 books. They're shorter. Some of them are almost novella length, like 30,000 words, and then some are closer to 50. I love this. I started with a blended family. There's 4 siblings. The 2 oldest were their mother was married to their father, who's a complete bastard. And then the third brother, his mother was like a Vegas dancer and basically dropped the kid on the father's doorstep and took money and left. And then the fourth sibling is the sister. Her mother got pregnant when she was 18 with this bastard father, and she ended up raising all 4 of the kids. And then there's a surprise baby who's an adult by the time they find out about him, and a couple peripheral characters who get their own stories, and the mother gets her own story.
Hey, sounds like she deserved it.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I love her book. But so the very last story, I do an epilogue, which is the wedding of the oldest brother and his heroine, and that was really fun. Like I didn't need to add it. I could have just thrown in a few lines or whatever. But it was really fun to write the wedding, and there were some unanswered things from their story that I sort of closed off. They could have stayed unanswered. It wouldn't have impacted the reader in any way, but I tied up some loose ends at the end of the 7th book.
Yeah, you just wanted to go back and spend more time with them.
I did. Well, they're fun, and and so I've toyed with writing a Christmas story with the whole family together. I just haven't had a chance, so that might be next Christmas.
Do you celebrate when you begin or end or publish a book? Have you ever?
I'm so bad. I don't. I used to, there's some people, buy themselves a purse or whatever. I just don't. I don't really do that. There's always more to do, and so I find that I just want to get on to the next thing.
Do you have ideas that have never gelled? So do you have the drawer of whether that's a physical drawer or a mental drawer of half finished or unpublished stories?
I do. I have some things out there that are just not ready to be done yet.
Because your writing isn't quite ready for it, or because it doesn't? Why are they not yet ready to be done?
I just think I'm not ready to write them. You find like all of a sudden I'll be like, you know what? I'm not ready for that yet. I need to wait until I'm in a place where that story just I can't stand but not write it. If that makes any sense.
Oh yes, to me.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if readers understand that. Sometimes it's you get to the point. I like to think about a story for a little bit before I actually start writing it, because then I like in the back of my brain, I think is it Jenny Cruzy calls it the girls in the basement, something like that. Like there's you got all these things sort of percolating around, but they need to sort of
I think
sit and simmer.
that's Barbara Samuel.
Is that who it is? Yeah. So I'm a firm believer that it's better if it sort of simmers in the back of your brain. So I do have some things out there that I think I'll write eventually, but I'm not ready to write them yet.
Are there any that you initially thought, well, that's a really good idea, and then as you sort of thought about it you just realized it wasn't going to come together? Or do you hold out hope for all of them?
I kind of hold out hope for all of them.
Me too. I always think that
Yeah,
there's going to be a way to work this somehow, sometime.
exactly. Yeah. It's my innate sense of optimism.
What is the favorite part for you of the writing process?
Oh, I loved this question. It's funny. I love that the beginning, like writing the beginning is really fun. Just that, there's so many possibilities. There's so many different directions you can go in. And then I also love the part where the story goes a little slower at first, and through the middle it can be a little slower, or trying to figure out exactly how you want to position things for the end. But then there's like that burst at the end where you're just sort of vomiting out words because things are going so fast, like your fingers almost can't keep up with
Mm-hmm.
what's happening in your brain. And I love that feeling. But I also like revision too. Like I like going through and taking all that vomit, which is a horrible word, but it's so appropriate.
It is.
and making it, like making everything pretty and flow. And it's a different part of your brain, but it's a different process. But I like both sides.
That sounds like you like the whole thing. What part do you not like?
I feel like middles are always a little tough. And it's striking that balance of making sure that your characters, I have an idea of where I want them to end up, obviously, but sometimes making sure that they make the right decisions to make that where I want them to end up believable and where they should end up. It's a challenge.
Yeah, and the middle, I think, it just struck me because you were talking about at the beginning there are all these possibilities, and my process is really weird and different. So when I talk about beginning, middle, and end, it's not necessarily the beginning, middle, and end of the book. It's the beginning, middle, and end of writing the book for me. But anyhow, the middle part is where you're eliminating possibilities.
Right.
You have to narrow down. You can't have it go all the possible directions. And I don't like that. I want to keep the doors open as long as possible. And it usually, for me, comes down to I've set a deadline, I've promised the readers, and I have got to let go of things.
Yeah.
That's the only way I will do it. So that's my new theory about the middle. Just from what you just said, I've established a middle theory. I have another question from a reader that I wanted to ask you, and it possibly all ties together with another question. The reader asks, what is your favorite place to write and why? Does it have an inspirational view? And I also want to ask you then if you have a routine for writing.
I don't necessarily have a favorite place to write, as in a specific concrete place. I love to go to a hotel and write. And I started doing this, it's been a while, maybe 10 years ago. I had an agent who wanted to read my manuscript, and I wanted to just get it perfect before I sent it to him. And so I checked myself into a hotel for 2.5 days. I literally didn't have them clean my room, and I spent 60 hours minus a few hours for sleep just polishing.
Wow.
And I love that. I'm so productive because there's nothing else to do. I can't go do laundry. I can't go to the kitchen and make a cup of tea. And then, an hour later when I've like cleaned my sink and organized my spices, I think I love to go to a hotel and write. And when I can, I'll do it, especially at the beginning. Like if I can start a book in a hotel, because sometimes the starting is the hard part. Even though there's so many possibilities, how do you choose? Like, where am I going to go? And it's easy to get sidetracked or walk away because I'm not sure what I want to do. And if you're in a hotel, you're not going to walk away. There's nothing to do. So I really like doing that.
And people are bringing you food, and you don't have to, you don't have to clean.
I go out pretty much like maybe once in the morning, get a cup of coffee, and I might go out in the afternoon and get like an iced tea. But otherwise, I will, and sometimes I'll sit in a restaurant. I'll take my planner, like my Moleskine book, or I'm using Leichtterm now actually, and a pen and make notes while I'm eating. But besides that, I'm in my room, and I usually get up at 6 in the morning, and I work until anywhere between like 10:30 and midnight. Go to sleep and do it all over again the next day.
Wow.
And I love that.
I was stunned. I went to a writers' conference last year or the year before when I didn't know. I don't think I knew anybody, or I only knew a couple people, which is fairly rare for the writers' conferences I go to mostly. And usually for that reason, they are horrible for me trying to get any writing done because I'm out talking with people, visiting with old friends or meeting new friends. And this conference, I was on a tough deadline, and I would go to sessions and, talk to people and be with people, but then I'd go back to the room. And if there wasn't a session that interested me, and for that hour, I would write. And then I'd go back and I'd go to another session, and then I'd come back, and I was stunned at how productive I was.
Yeah.
And I think some of it was the focus. For me, I know some of it was having the limited time. I'm very deadline responsive. But I also think it was somebody else made my bed. Somebody else,
Right.
dealt with the food. It's always a sign that the writing isn't going well when my house is in really good order. So when I get to the point where cleaning closets seems better than writing, I'm in deep trouble.
Exactly. That's funny. And then you know what? I'm sorry, I forgot the second half. What was the second half of the question?
About a routine.
Oh.
Do you have a routine?
Well, I used to. I just moved. So I moved from the San Francisco area to Boston area. My whole writing life has been turned upside down by that. So my old process was I would get up and go straight to work. Try not to look at Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, anything. I just get up and work for an hour and a half. I actually had have a Keurig in my office. So I'd make myself a cup of coffee and try and get some words on the page. And then once that was done, then I might check my social media and maybe do some business stuff. And then I'd go back to writing. But I'd put in like 8 to 10 hours where I just pretty much was in my office, and then I'd, pop out and get lunch or whatever on the days that I write regularly. Now I moved, and I'm still setting up my office. It's a good thing this is not video too, because it's still kind of a mess. And I actually started working out with a trainer, which I'm immensely grateful to be doing. And so that has changed it sort of changed it, because that is my solid commitment 3 times a week. So now I don't really have a process. As a matter of fact, today I woke up at 6:30 and I wrote for an hour and a half before I went to my training appointment, which I normally don't do. I'm not an early riser in general.
I don't know. I've heard 6 o'clock a couple times. To me, that's a very early
Actually,
riser.
since I moved to the East Coast, I get up between 7:30 and 8 most days. But the last couple days, you know what? I'm deep in the middle of writing this book, and I've been waking up early because I can't wait to get words on the page, which is a fantastic feeling.
But are you offering 7:30 to 8 as being a late riser?
I feel like it is, yes.
No.
Yeah, but you stay up late. You sent me an email at 2:30 in the morning. I was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
I would asleep for 3 hours at that point.
Yeah, I'm a night owl. I'm definitely a night owl. So 7:30 or 8 is early rising, way early rising for me. I'm up with the larks if I'm up at 10. So very different approach. Okay, question about how you said you're setting up your office now. So what is your office going to look out on? Or does it have any view?
Part of the reason that we moved to the East Coast was, well, it's a little cheaper out here, which is nice. California's lovely, but it's expensive. And then we really wanted to live by the ocean. So right now, I'm actually looking out on Ipswich Bay. Now, that's because it's winter and all the trees in front of me don't have leaves.
Yeah.
There's actually like 2 or 3 houses in front of my house before you get to the bay. But because it's winter, I can see a little bit of water right now.
And are
I forget what they
you
call
finding that?
I have seasonal blues.
Are you finding that inspiring, seeing the water?
Yes. And even not necessarily from my house. I mean, it's very nice that I have this little blue and I know it's the water. But I live kind of on a so I live in Gloucester, which is in theory a little bit of an island. And so I can, depending on how I drive home, I see water constantly. If I take the long way home from training, I think it's 4 miles instead of 2.5 or something. The views are stunning. It's beautiful. And I think it's very peaceful and I love it. I love it. I feel really blessed that I'm able to live here.
And Lisa and I have talked about it. Just so happens that Gloucester is my dad's hometown, and we'd have family reunions there. And my second book is set there. I actually fictionally added another beach. So, which the people should be really grateful for because that property is very valuable. So, I added to the beach shore, the shoreline in Gloucester. But I have to get there. We should have a writing retreat there.
Oh, it's so beautiful here.
It's a really cool area. Well, that's going to be interesting to see how you adjust and what changes you make. Did you leave a community of writers behind in California?
I did.
That's hard.
And that's probably one of the well, and I had a very good group of friends. I lived in California for 26 years. A great group of personal friends, and then I had a great group of writer friends. And I miss them. I've FaceTimed with a few of them, which has been nice. I think that's like technology is amazing. One of my goals for the beginning of next year is to branch out. There are some writers in Massachusetts, so that's nice, but there isn't anybody very close by. Whereas in California, I had coffee with one of my writer friends at least once every 2 weeks, sometimes once a week. Just
That is nice. Yeah.
Her, she had kids in school, so it was sort of dependent on her kids' lives. San Francisco has a very, very active romance community and great group of women. So I'm going to miss them.
Yes, and build up a new group now.
I belong to Romance Writers of America, and New England has a chapter that is relatively active. So I'm hoping, and I have met some people who live around here. So once I start going to those meetings, I'm hoping I'll make some more connections with people here.
Oh, I'm sure you will. The New England chapter conference in the spring is really good. I've spoken at it a couple times and really enjoy those folks. But it is hard when you've had a great group close by to venture away from that. I often think a lot of my closest writing friends are far across the country and far flung, so beyond the country too. But as you said, technology is wonderful.
It's amazing. And I think I'm really lucky. I think I've been to NINC 2 years, Novelists Inc. conference 2 years in a row, and that's been amazing. I also do a conference, they call it an unconference, so it's not really structured, and I've been doing that in San Francisco, and I'm going back, which is nice, so I'll see my friends.
I want to go to that. I haven't been able to get in on the registration.
It's very small. I think it's 40 people. But it's a great sharing of information. I think it's great.
So, well, I hope I can get there in the future. Hope I can fit in among the 40. Maybe they'll take 41. Okay, before you wanted to be a writer, what did you want to do? Or did you always want to be a writer?
I don't know that I really aspired to be a writer per se, but I wrote a lot when I was younger. I was a French major in college, which is not particularly employable. I actually was going back to school. When I started writing, I was going back to school to be an interior designer. Because I love like furniture and colors, and I love like putting together a room. I think it's really a fun thing to do, and I change things around. I add new pillows or whatever. I love doing that. This is funny because I hadn't really thought about it, but I was reading through your questions and you ask about that. I have a really hard time setting a scene when I have to force myself to add the setting later. I frequently don't put any setting details in, which I find
Huh.
really funny because I love interiors and
Yeah.
I love colors. I think color can affect your mood. I like all this stuff, and I thought I love doing all that stuff, and I never write settings, not through first pass, unless I'm struggling with a
That
book.
is
And if
interesting.
I'm struggling, then I'll write a whole bunch about the setting and then add those details in later. Otherwise, that's a third or fourth pass.
Huh.
I know, isn't that funny?
That is really interesting. Do you think it is it so like are you writing setting like if it's a really ugly room you just don't want to deal with that or is it any kind of setting?
So, actually, what I find is that if it's an ugly room or I wrote a scene like in a nasty like motel room with dirty 70s carpeting and things like that. Like if it has some impact on the characters, then yes, that stuff goes in right away. But if it's just sort of a generic like room or restaurant, I find that I don't put any details in, and then I have to layer those in later.
I have a question that sort of touches on that comes from a reader that has to do with the visual aspect. And she says, when the cover image doesn't match the character description, and this reader says that's a pet peeve of hers, how does it feel for the author?
Really bothers me. I do my own covers. I don't design my own covers, but I typically pick the couple. And I actually have a book that I wrote called Dangerous Game. It's a follow on to the Black Cipher Files trilogy that features a secondary character who I loved, and she needed a happily ever after. The hero is Korean. So it's a Korean hero and an African American heroine. And I searched for days for a couple,
Mm-hmm.
and I could not find a Korean man and a black woman. I looked days. I was getting websites. I looked at like 7 websites, could not find it. So I finally had to I picked a dark-haired Caucasian guy who was not looking at his face is not forward. So you could sort of like, if you
Uh-huh.
squinted in a dark room, pretend that he's Korean. And it was really disappointing. And I got reader pushback on that cover. And I said, I'm really sorry. Like I kind of based the hero on this Korean actor named Won Bin, who's in a Korean action adventure called The Man from Nowhere. And he's gorgeous, and he is who was in my head as I was writing this character. And
Mm-hmm.
to have to settle for this perfectly attractive Caucasian guy was really frustrating. So I totally
But
get where
not the
she's
right guy. Yeah.
yeah, there's nothing wrong with him, but I could not I couldn't find that couple. I still like when I
So,
think about it, I think I should keep looking, and if I ever find a good couple, then redo that cover because I it bothers me.
and that's one of the joys of being an indie author that we can do that. We have the control of being able to go back and change things. And
Yes,
yes,
I would.
so keep looking.
I am. I'm looking.
You said you got reader pushback on that. Have you had other encounters with readers? Do you have good stories about talking with readers?
Yeah, so this is kind of fun. I on my most recent book, Diego is his semi-charmed life, and Diego is Puerto Rican. He basically starts out kind of a rough beginning, and after this encounter with Penny, he sort of expands his horizons of what he is possible for him, and he ends up becoming a very successful businessman, which is when they meet again. And I had a reader send me a really lovely note. Diego reminded her of her father who had passed away, and his story was very
Oh,
similar. He came from Puerto Rico and started his own business and ended up being very successful. And she just said, thank you for reminding me of my dad. I admired him, and it was a really, really touching letter. It was nice. So
oh, that's wonderful.
it was
That's
neat.
wonderful.
It was really neat.
And
Yeah.
how generous of her to take the time to let you know that. If somebody has not read any of your books, they're new to you, which book would be the best starting place, do you think?
So I would say one of two places. If you like longer, more intricate plots, Blowback, which is the first book in the Black Cipher File series, is a good place to start. And if you like Kindle books, that book is free right now. It's not always free, but it so happens that it's free right now. If you like shorter, little bit shorter books that are a little bit lighter, there's definitely a suspense plot, but it's not super involved or convoluted. My Family Stone series is the first book is Stone Cold Heart, and that is always free on Kindle. And then if that is not a standalone, I don't have that as a standalone paperback. It's a like anthology, the first 5 books, so that would a little more expensive. But if you like Kindle books, the Stone Cold Heart is free, and that book features the youngest sister, Jess, who is a former FBI sniper, and the hero is an SAS officer. He's British, and they're working on a tropical island that's had an earthquake. They're doing disaster relief and a few other little things on the side, but it's a fun book. It's an interesting book.
That's great and really helpful to readers. And if you're interested in the print books, you can also always ask your library to get them, to order them, and then they would be available to you and other readers too. I love libraries. So put in a little plug there. Do you have any of your books, so you've got loyal readers, people who've read everything you've written, but maybe they've missed one? Do you have a book that's kind of a hidden gem?
The 6th book in the Family Stone series is Queen of Hearts, and that is actually the story of the mother who she's only 45, so she's a little older for typical romance heroines, and she's raised 4 kids. When she comes into the house, she's 25, and her stepson, if you will, is 14. So she had kind of a tough life. She has her own book, is the 6th book of the Family Stone series, and I love that book. It's really fun. She's been a mom for so long, and everybody thinks of her as a mom, and she wants passion and romance and a sex life, and she ends up getting together with the former commanding officer of the Jack, the oldest brother. So there's actually some really funny scenes in that book because they think of her as their mother, and when he finds out they're together, and the way he finds out is somewhat amusing. So I had a lot of fun writing that book, and a lot of times people will say, I don't really want to read an older heroine, but it's a really fun, funny book, and I love that she's sort of rediscovering her own sexuality after suppressing it for years. So
that's terrific. That sounds like a great book. I hope people will search it out. So, what have I not asked you that I should have, or that you would like to answer?
You didn't ask what I like to read, and I love to read. I mean, I think most writers do, although I could be wrong. So I read a lot of romantic suspense when I'm not writing it, and then I read contemporary romance. I actually love dystopian romance too, like the futuristic, the world's in a horrible place. Then I read a decent amount of nonfiction. I like nonfiction that's inspiring. My favorite book that I read last year that was nonfiction, or this year, I guess you would say, was The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes, who's the showrunner for Grey's Anatomy and How to Get Away with Murder.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. She's showrunner for 4 shows, I think, something crazy. She's an amazing writer, but that book is phenomenal. Big plug for it. I think it's if you're ever thinking that you're afraid of doing something, then reading that book will inspire you to just go for it. So I think that's probably it.
Tell everybody what how they can find out more about you and your books.
Okay, so if you go to my website, www.lisahughey.com, and all my books are on there. There's a fun little 20 things you didn't know about me, and
cool,
some other stuff.
I'll have to go look at that. See what I don't know about you. So we can do another interview, and I can ask nosy questions about those things. And we will have the URL in the show notes for folks, so that will be much easier to get to. Although if you are smart, you wrote it down really fast. Okay, now my very favorite part is what I think of as the epilogue, and these are either or questions. I've had many people try to cheat, but they're either or. So you can have cake or ice cream.
Cake, no question.
Cowboy boots or hiking boots?
Hiking boots.
So I think I might know the answer to this one. Mountains or beach?
Beach.
You don't want those those heights, right?
Yeah, that's pretty clear from where I moved and what I'm afraid of.
Day or night?
Day.
Toenail polish or bare toenails?
Toenail polish. I had a pedicure yesterday.
Leggings or sweats?
Leggings.
Dog or cat?
Cat, but only because I'm allergic to dogs.
Oh, I feel so sorry for you. Sorry.
You know what? I love my cats. My cats have been fun, so it's fine, but I love dogs too.
Okay, which is eerier to you, an owl hooting or coyotes howling?
Coyotes. As a side note, I have coyotes in my yard now. So we'll hear them at night sometimes.
It's a very disconcerting sound, but I think the howl hooting can. Okay, whoops, we can't. The owl hooting, not the howl hooting. Okay, sailboat or motorboat?
Sailboat? Can you tell that's iffy? I'm not sure. I think I like the idea of sailing.
Have you not been?
I have never been sailing. I've been on motorboats, but I've never been sailing.
You're gonna have.
Our plan
you're
is
gonna have to do that in Gloucester.
I live on the water now.
Yeah.
Yes, but my husband wants a motorboat, and he'll probably get his way on that one.
Okay, gardening or house decorating?
House decorating.
Paint or wallpaper?
Paint.
Good china or paper plates?
Good china.
And this is the last one. Save the best for last or grab the best first?
Grab the best first.
This has been a lot of fun, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us. And we hope all of you will come back next week for a new author and their stories behind the stories. Have a great week of reading. Happy reading. That's the show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for joining Authors Love Readers podcast. Remember, you can always find out more about our guest authors in the show notes, and you can find out more about me at www.patriciamclinn.com. You can also send in questions to be asked of future authors at podcast@authorslovereaders.com. Until next week, wishing you lots of happy reading. Bye.